I'm Justin. I'm a textile person. Love fibers. So today I'm going to be showing you how to make a lake pigment, which is taking an exhausted natural dye bath. It's one of with natural dyes, and it takes a water-soluble dye and turns it into an insoluble pigment, which can then be used for things like making like watercolor paints or like wood stains or crayons or anything that you like use a pigment for, you can use lake pigments for. So just to start out, I have in front of me an exhausted matter like dye bath, which just means that I've already dyed with it, and there's still a lot of pigment in there, but it's not going to be much color on cloth anymore. There's nothing stopping you from doing this with just like a dye bath that hasn't dyed fabric yet. You can literally just like make color out of whatever, and then make the pigment out of there. You can get a much stronger pigment that way. But this is just a thing that I do a lot to put more sustainability into my dye practice, because natural uses up a lot of water, a lot of materials, so it's just a way to kind of let that water go just a little bit more before you just dump it all back down the drain. So the materials that you'll need are pretty basic. So here I have alum, which for the non-fiber people, alum is what we call a mordant, and a mordant is usually a metallic salt that we use to bind natural color to natural fiber. They don't bond together like by nature, which is like really silly. So we have to use the mordant to make sure it's like wash fast and write fast. So alum is our most common mordant. We call it a white mordant because it doesn't change the color of the dye. Like iron, for example, when you use that as a mordant, it darkens and sides the colors. Alum doesn't do that. Alum is just straight up, it just binds it. You can get this at the grocery store in like the spices aisle. They use it in like pickling. You can also put some alum in like fresh cut flowers to keep them growing longer. That's usually what like the flower food and cut flowers is a little bit of alum. And then we have soda ash. Soda ash, if you have like tie-dyed t-shirts, you've used soda ash. Soda ash is just like, in natural dyes we use it as a base or as like a caustic agent. So we use it when we're scouring, which is like chemically cleaning fabric or fiber or anything to dye. But in chemical dyeing, like synthetic color dyeing, we use soda ash as the dye fixer. So soda ash is what makes the dye adhere. But in this context, we're using it just as a base and as an acid. So alum is acidic, whereas soda ash is basic. So this dye bath right here, I saved 4 liters of it, and this is like the only like mathy part of it. For every liter of dye, you want 10 grams of your acid and 5 grams of your base. And also, when you're handling these powders, you want to be wearing a dust mask, and you also should be wearing gloves. I'm very lucky, and I don't have sensitivity to alum or soda ash, so I can do this just fine and not worry about it. But so there's that. So I just put in the alum. Now I'm gonna mix the soda ash a little bit more. Okay. And then I'm putting in the soda ash, and if everything is right, this should start to effervesce, question mark. Are you not gonna do it? Usually you get like a really big like baking soda volcano like moment when you do this, but it's being silly right now. Maybe because it's cold that it's not doing that. This has been in the fridge for a while, but usually it kind of like bubbles over and like overflows. So I can tell that it's working because there are indeed bubbles coming out of it, and the color has gone from like a more like clear dye color to like richer kind of like there are things happening in it color. I don't really know how to describe it, but so what's happening with this is the mordant that we put in there is now binding to all of the dye particles in here, and they are starting to precipitate down to the bottom. And once that's done, it looks like this, which is like really crazy. So this is a lake that I made out of some indigo washout. So like after I have indigo, you have to like wash it out. And I took that like wastewater and turned that into this pigment. So you can kind of see here this like clear part. I don't know if I'm showing it on camera or not, but you'll see a clear part, and that's called the supernatant. That's called the supernatant, and that's all of the water that doesn't have the dye particles in it, and then the dye particles that found in the mordant are going to be at the bottom, and that's your lake pigment. Right? We call it our lake, which is really funny. You do need distilled water for this. So once you've done this first part of putting in the acid in the base, and then it's all precipitated down, you have to then pour out the supernatant and then put the lake into something like this. This is just like a colander that I put some paper towel in. It's best to use coffee filters, but I couldn't find mine, so do what you have to do. Put that in there, get the water out of it, and then you have to put the lake pigment back in here, and then you have to do what's called washing your lake, which is just dumping some distilled water into it. And what that does is it dissolves all the leftover minerals in there. And without that, you'll get these kind of like crystalline formations in your lake pigment, which could be really cool if you're just making lake pigment as like the piece itself, and you have these other like crystals in it from like whatever the hell is in your water, wherever you are. But if you're trying to take this and process it into pigment that's going to be made in paint, then you want to make sure you're washing your lake, because if not, it'll be kind of hard to get around that. So now that I have this here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sink and pour out as much of the supernatant as possible. You'll see the lake will start to like slide down into it. Once you get some of the lake pouring out, then stop. And then we'll be back to do the next step after I pour this out. So I'm back. I poured out a good deal of supernatant. A little bit was starting to fall out of the lake. And I didn't want to lose too much of it because this is quite precious to me. So I didn't want to just like let it all go to waste. So now that I have that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to carefully take what I have of the lake and just pour it into this into this colander that I've lined. And also, you don't need to dry your pigment out. You can keep it as, there's some of it like on my hand. You can see how like rich it is. You can keep it, and it's like kind of like in this like fluid, sludgy state. That's what's called a split lake. So you can take that and you can do what's called a split lake dye, which is more suitable for protein fibers. Yeah, and then now that I have this, I'm just gonna let this chill out for a couple of days. And I'll come back when it's all like crusted over on top of it, and I can just like flake it off of the paper towel, and then I can like grind up in a mortar and pestle, and then it's ready to be used whatever I want to use it with. The reason I chose natural dyes is because it's like much more sustainable, because the colors are actually biodegradable, as opposed to synthetic dyes where the colors aren't biodegradable. Yeah, just it's a way to like introduce a lot more sustainability into what I'm doing, which makes me feel better about the waste I'm making to make art. It's really, really awesome because natural color truly is everywhere, and it's very ubiquitous. So once you start becoming aware of like where you can find color from nature, then color becomes a lot more democratic to you. There's a book called The Art and Science of Natural Dyes by Catherine Ellis. If you're interested in natural dyes and natural colors, like that is the book to get. It's quite an investment. I know VCU Library is getting a copy of it because I asked them to, but that book is just awesome, and that is in there. There's also a dyer whose name is Kayla Powers, who I'm like obsessed with. She's like super cool. Nope. Happy pigment making.